The new UK Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, is preparing to set out cost of living support to give households breathing space as he begins his first full day as Prime Minister. In a few hours, he'll also chair his first cabinet meeting. Mr Burnham has made key cabinet appointments over the last few hours, replacing or moving many of the ministers who worked for his predecessor, Sir Keir Starmer. The post of Chancellor has gone to John Healey, who resigned last month as Defence Secretary in a row over military spending. A former leader of the Labour Party, Ed Miliband, has been given the role of Foreign Secretary. He replaces Yvette Cooper, who's now been appointed Health Secretary. Shabana Mahmood, who's pursued a tough line on immigration, will stay on as Home Secretary. Well, Andy Burnham has promised a new political and economic model, saying Britain needed to show the world that it could regain stability. Here's our political correspondent, Jack Fenwick.
Most Labour MPs had expected one of these two to get the job of Chancellor, but instead a surprise face was spotted heading towards Downing Street yesterday afternoon.
Where are you off to, Mr Healey? Have you got a new job?
John Healey resigned as Defence Secretary just a few weeks ago because he was unhappy about how much funding the Treasury was willing to give the armed forces. Now he'll be the one tasked with those difficult spending decisions.
Fiscal control is the first duty of any Chancellor. It is mine. And fiscal credibility is the bedrock for economic stability and for national security. And you heard the Prime Minister say, in this more dangerous world, we will meet our commitments on defence to our international allies.
As for the favourites, Shabana Mahmood will stay on as Home Secretary, and Ed Miliband is now the Foreign Secretary. So what about the rest of Burnham's newly appointed top team? Wes Streeting, who had been a potential leadership rival, becomes the Defence Secretary. Angela Rayner has gone back to her old job as Housing Secretary, where she'll be tasked with following through on the PM's pledges to end rough sleeping and build record numbers of council houses. Lucy Powell, the Labour Party's deputy leader, is now the Education Secretary, another area picked out by Burnham as a priority. Yvette Cooper has been given a demotion from Foreign Secretary to Health, but could now oversee a much talked about reform of the social care system. And Louise Haigh, arguably Andy Burnham's closest political ally, becomes First Secretary of State, the de facto Deputy Prime Minister. The new PM has promised unity within the Labour Party, though many of those sacked yesterday were notable Starmer loyalists. He's also spoken about economic growth in all areas of the country. The Conservatives have already cast doubt on that.
His analysis of where things need to go is wrong. Sure. And if you ask any business out there, what is the challenge at the moment? They are overtaxed, there is no growth, and I don't see anything that he's saying that's actually grasped that as the fundamental problem, because if we do not get growth in this country, he's not going to be able to do all these lovely things that he's pledging.
Andy Burnham's other priority last night was calling other international leaders. The first of those was with President Trump, who said the two had a very good conversation in which they discussed North Sea oil, trade, the military alliance and the Strait of Hormuz, and wished him good luck in the new job. So a busy day one. Andy Burnham's made it clear that day two will see a focus on the cost of living and the support he can offer to families across the UK. Jack Fenwick, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, with me here in the studio is Tim Muffet. So, Tim, lots of changes. Just take us through the most significant ones.
Yeah, some interesting ones, aren't there? I mean, Andy Burnham removed a number of loyalists of former PM Keir Starmer. Out went Rachel Reeves as Chancellor, David Lammy as Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary, and Steve Reed as Community Secretary. Several senior figures did retain their positions, including Heidi Alexander at Transport and Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood. But there were some really, I think, surprising names. I mean, John Healey as Chancellor, I think, took a lot of people by surprise. Absolutely, yeah. Yes. I mean, many speculated that role would go to Ed Miliband or Shabana Mahmood. John Healey has returned to the Cabinet as Chancellor less than 2 months after quitting as Defence Secretary. So I think a lot of people were surprised by that. Ed Miliband as Foreign Secretary, moving there from Energy. He had been touted as a possible Chancellor, but I think opinion was divided between supporters who pointed to his experience in the Treasury and opponents who distrusted his views, particularly on energy. Louise Haigh, Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. That title is more of a ceremonial one. It is a very, very powerful position. She's First Secretary of State and Cabinet Office Minister. She'll run the Cabinet Office, the department that supports the Prime Minister and coordinates the government's policies to deliver its agenda. So a big, big job for her. Wes Streeting, new Defence Secretary, replacing Dan Jarvis, who had only been in the role for a matter of weeks. So, I mean, he resigned as Health Secretary in May, saying he had lost confidence in Sir Keir Starmer as Prime Minister, and eventually decided to back Andy Burnham rather than launch his own leadership bid. So he's now the Defence Secretary. So some really interesting announcements there. I think Yvette Cooper remains in Cabinet, but a new role as Health Secretary as well. So, yeah, we're going to have to wait and see how it all pans out.
So there have also been lots of questions in terms of, policies, detail, but many people saying we're probably not going to see much of that or indication of where we're going till the budget. So what can we expect today then?
Well, we expect the first Cabinet meeting to take place today, and Andy Burnham yesterday promised to make announcements this week that would, quote, give people some breathing space to help with the cost of living. And there are reports that this morning we will see a fully funded package of cuts to energy bills. Andy Burnham also pledged to bring back hope to Britain, and in his speech yesterday on Downing Street he said he wanted to bring about the biggest changes in the last 40 years to British politics. So I think things like that are obviously going to take a little longer to actually see how they are going to be instigated in reality. He did promise to build a new economy, putting life's essentials back under public control. One clear pledge he did make yesterday was that he would end rough sleeping in our country, and this was swiftly followed by a press release promising an extra £340 million for the task over the next 5 years from within the Housing Department budget. So I think, again, that was a pretty clear pledge, and it's going to be something which people will be able to see whether it's working or not, because rough sleeping is obviously a very visible problem. So that'll be interesting to see. The manner in which he delivered the speech certainly was different. No lectern, no notes, and I'm sure he is hoping that this change of Prime Minister will feel different for voters as well. He says he wants the government to be a circuit breaker with the biggest political changes in 40 years. Will the reality bear that out? We're going to have to wait and see.
Yeah, 10 years, he says. We'll see. Thank you. Tim Muffet, thank you. Well, as soon as he became Prime Minister, Andy Burnham started holding calls with world leaders from France, Germany and Ukraine. And one of his first calls was with President Donald Trump. And Mr Burnham invited the US President to visit Manchester. Our North America editor, Sarah Smith, has more now on what the two men said.
Well, he hadn't even been Prime Minister for a full hour before he spoke to Donald Trump. And we've got some information about what they talked about. We're told that Andy Burnham underlined his commitment to defence and security, and also to helping to secure the free movement of shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump will have been very pleased to hear all of that. He is deeply concerned that the UK should, and other NATO members, should be spending more money on defence. And also, President Trump had already welcomed what he believes is going to be Andy Burnham's policy to open up the North Sea for more oil and gas drilling. He had celebrated that on a post in social media. So there clearly is some common ground between the two of them, that and the fact that the Prime Minister congratulated Donald Trump on a very successful World Cup, and they both agreed that England had performed well. But obviously there will be policy differences between the two of them as well. That doesn't mean that they can't have a good working relationship. The question is, will they be able to replicate the warm friendship, surprisingly, that Sir Keir Starmer enjoyed with Donald Trump, even though there were lots of things they didn't agree on. But, of course, that relationship fractured quite badly recently over the war in Iran, and it is how to deal with that is going to be one of the most challenging foreign policy issues that Andy Burnham is going to face.
And that was Sarah Smith there. David Smith is the Washington Bureau Chief for The Guardian newspaper. Good morning to you, David. Wonderful to have you with us. So, reflections then on the new Prime Minister from the US. How is it being read?
Yeah, it's certainly got some coverage in the US. Academics, political scientists, others I've spoken to here say Andy Burnham's starting with a relatively clean slate in that he's an unknown quantity. One even described him as a political nobody to most Americans, with probably less name recognition than most incoming prime ministers. Perhaps that will be an advantage. He comes without political baggage and has got an opportunity to make a first impression, and certainly with Donald Trump, it seems to have gone relatively well. Some quite warm words from Trump about it being a good call. Trump seems especially interested in this issue of North Sea oil and seems to believe Burnham will be more favourable on that particular score. But there was also some scepticism in the US media of note. the Washington Post ran an editorial that said he offered more platitudes than policies during his first speech at 10 Downing Street, and his agenda won't arrest Britain's stagnation. And the Post took a dim view of Andy Burnham's past criticisms of Margaret Thatcher. So a bit of a mixed reception overall.
And what about Andy Burnham's past criticisms of Mr. Trump?
Not too much focus on that so far, at least from the Trump camp, which is good news. I think they're accustomed now to foreign leaders coming into office having spoken out about Trump in the past. And fortunately, the US president can have a short memory with that sort of thing if you flatter him in the right way. And I think that first meeting between Trump and Burnham is going to be fascinating. We remember, of course, Keir Starmer coming to the Oval Office brandishing a letter of invitation from the King for a state visit. Burnham probably can't pull that trick again, but if he's looking for a model, maybe it's Zoran Mamdani, the Democratic mayor of New York. On paper, he and Trump are very different people with very different policies, and yet they seem to get on well, and perhaps that's because Trump admires someone who's a winner and someone who's a populist. And what perhaps Trump and Burnham do share is just that idea that politics has failed people. Burnham even referred to that in his remarks outside Downing Street, the idea of people who are sick of politics and they want an outsider who's going to shake up the system.
David, very quickly, Yvette Cooper, I don't know how she'd nurtured those relations with the US. We now have a new Foreign Secretary in Ed Miliband. Just talk us through that.
Yeah, what a challenging time with the Iran war, not only in progress, but seemingly escalating by the day. And I've certainly heard critics of Trump in the US say Britain made absolutely the right move, just like Harold Wilson staying out of the Vietnam War to avoid getting sucked into this conflict. I think on the British side, there's some irritation that they don't get more thanks for what support is being provided to the US military efforts. But I think a thorny one for both the new Foreign Secretary and the new Prime Minister. And one analyst I spoke to here said, don't mention the special relationship. It's not special anymore. Frankly, with Donald Trump, it's often an abusive relationship.
OK, David Smith, thank you very much for your thoughts. Thank you.